SEAM, SEG Advanced Modeling Corporation. What is SEAM? A collaborative industrial research effort dedicated to large-scale, leading-edge geophysical modeling and numerical simulation. A unique research partnership between SEG and the geophysical community.
Hello, this is Kevin Bishop, and let me start off with a big thank you to everyone watching and listening to this video presentation from the SEG Advanced Modeling team. As I mentioned, I am Kevin Bishop, and I'm the 2014 chairman of the SEAM Corporation Board of Directors. SEAM has been part of my life since its inception. This is my third year on the board of directors after serving 5 years as chairman of the Phase 1 Management Committee. Please feel free to approach me in the hallways or on telephone and ask me questions or offer some discussion. I'm always open to new concepts and advancements in our shared interests of the science and technology. So what does SEAM offer you? Very simply stated, SEAM facilitates the organization of industrial research consortia that are designed to fulfill a need in the industry. You bring the need or problem facing the industry and an interest in doing something about it. If that need is of common interest to other companies, then we have the grounds to help form a consortia. The SEAM Corporation acts as the operator and handles the typical day-to-day activities like financials, legal contracting, long-term preservation of the deliverables, etc. The Board of Directors is a governing body that is bound by the formation terms of the SEAM Corporation to ensure everything is done appropriately. Throughout this video presentation, you will hear details from each of the operated consortia and exciting information about the 2 new consortia. In my part here, will not get into those details, but only to inform you of the valuable product of those consortia will have an impact on the future of our shared science. Let me explain the goals of the SEAM Corporation from a high level. The main strategic goal is to accelerate the pace of innovation and to serve the global membership of the SEG. You would have to admit there is no substitution for advancing technology than to test it on precisely known pieces of Earth. And that is what SEAM has done in the past, generating Earth models based on rock physics, generating seismic data and non-seismic data from those models, and presenting that to the industry for testing and evaluating your new research endeavors. A second goal is to maintain a constant stream of research consortia activities. The reason we need a constant stream is to support the services provided by the SEG in order to operate each of those consortia. These support services have manpower and people behind the scenes, and we'd like to continue that capability in the new consortia. A third goal is a near-term objective is to reach out beyond just the seismic and non-seismic related activities to a much broader community by expanding research focus to include projects that serve the integrated interpretational communities. This allows further alignment with related SEG activities such as the Interpretational Journal and engages other organizations like the AAPG and the SPE. A final goal is to encourage the broad use of the SEAM deliverables by making them publicly available. After a brief period of time of the consortium members' ability to use it prior to becoming public, typically at 2 years, then the data will become available for anybody to be able to license and purchase. This involves the licensing cost-related activities that basically facilitate the longer-term archive and storage and the overhead related to the distribution, as well as a little bit of funds that can help further the operations of the SEAM Corporation. We are pleased that a number of researchers have taken advantage to license and receive the available SEAM Phase 1 deliverables. They are now being used to develop new innovative capabilities and to demonstrate their abilities that you've probably have seen in a number of SEG-related presentations or marketing talks. So, in closing, personally, I feel SEAM is doing the right thing for our industry. It is my hope that you feel the same way as well. I look forward to the great new innovations resulting from our efforts, and I hope that you find the remaining part of this presentation informative and get excited about becoming a SEAM member and using the SEAM data. Thank you.
What is SEAM? Formed in 2007, SEAM is a separately incorporated subsidiary of SEG, governed by its own board of directors. 2014 SEAM Board of Directors. Kevin Bishop, Chair, 2014. Bill Abriel, Vice Chair, 2016. Roy Kligfield, 2016. Henri Uleve, 2014. Yagwa Lee, 2014. Kamal Alyalya, 2015. Steve Danbaum, 2015. Scott Morton, 2015. SEAM projects are managed by technical project managers in conjunction with the management committees made up of participant representatives. Michael Failer, Phase 1 and Pressure Prediction Project Manager. Senior Research Scientist at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He can be reached at michael.failer@gmail.com. Michael Oristaglio, Phase 2 Project Manager, Senior Research Scientist at Yale University. He can be reached at michael.oristaglio@yale.edu. SEAM produces results, a forum that promotes industrial collaborations, regular update articles in the leading edge, final report series on SEG ebooks, SEAM models and data sets. SEAM is proactively accelerating geophysical technologies. SEAM has a proven track record of producing results that are of high value to the participants. SEAM provides benchmarking tools for industry and teaching tools for academia to train the next generation of seismic processing and imaging experts. SEAM datasets provides users with tools to test algorithms for imaging and inversion, better understand features and the artifacts in real images, explore trade-offs in acquisition methodologies, train the next generation of seismic processing and imaging experts. It is important for the industry to be able to take the next steps from simple to more complex geological models, and SEAM plays a key role in this process. By John Rasmussen of EMGS. Completed Phase 1, Challenges of Subsalt Imaging in Tertiary Basins with emphasis on deep water Gulf of Mexico. In progress, Phase 2, Land Seismic Challenges, Thrust Model, Arid Model, and the Barrett Unconventional Model. New, Pressure Prediction, will evaluate and advanced current methodologies for pre-drill pressure and hazard prediction. Coming in 2015, Life Afield, Synthetic Models for Improving Workflows in Managing Life Afield. Register for SEAM Workshop through SEG Annual Meeting Registration. For more information, email stefan.coccolini@cgg.com. Organizers include Stefan Coccolini, George L. Cassie, and Milos Vetkovic, through the support of SEG Advanced Modeling Corporation. Want to learn more? Visit www.seg.org/SEAM or email us at seam@seg.org. The SEAM project has created data sets we can exchange with academia and across the industry for external benchmarking. By Henri Uleve, Total. Available now, the SEAM Phase 1 model and data are now available to the general public for license. For more details, please visit www.seg.org/SEAM. SEAM Phase 1 Partnership. SEAM received a $2.6 million contract from RIPSI to expand the Phase 1 project with additional models and simulations. RIPSI subcontract number 07121-2001. SEAM Phase 1 produces results. Data to be licensed in 2013. 40 by 35 by 15 -KM model. 62,478 free surface acoustic shots. 2,403 absorbing surface shots. Up to 436,921 traces per shot. 200 terabyte uncompressed data. 11 classic data sets. RIPSI expansion of $2.6 million subcontract under U.S. Department of Energy contract. Complete project documentation. For more information on licensing the data or on SEAM, please go to www.seg.org/SEAM. RIPSI believes that the investment in this program is rewarding for the entire industry, and SEG is the perfect vehicle to bring industrial partners together to develop a model that's useful to all. By Bill Head, RIPSI. SEAM vendors include AGT, Advanced Geophysical Technology, Broad Geo, CGG, EMGS, Halliburton, Midland Valley, Nanosize, Rice University, Sandy National Laboratories, Western GECO, SEAM Phase 1 and 2 partners, 24 companies in Phase 1, $2.6 million, 22 companies in Phase 2, $4,160,000. RIPSI, U.S. Department of Energy, $2.6 million, totaling $10,300,000, providing the resources and solutions to meet tomorrow's challenges. SEAM partners include Anadarko, BGP, BHP Billiton, BP, CGG, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, Devon, EMGS, ENI, ExxonMobil, Geotrace, Global Geophysical, Hess, Ion, Landmark, Maersk Oil, Marathon Oil, Nexen, Oxy, PGS, Petrobras, Repsol, Rock Solid Images, Saudi Aramco, Sigma 3, Shell, Sinopec, Stat Oil, Talisman Energy, Total, Tullow Oil, Western GECO. Available now, the SEAM Phase 1 model and data are now available to the general public for license. For more details, please visit www.seg.org/SEAM.
Welcome to SEAM Phase 2, Land Seismic Challenges. Phase 2 is the second consortium of oil industry companies organized by SEG under SEAM Corporation to address the challenges of modeling modern 3D seismic exploration at full scale. My name is Michael Orstaglio. I'm an exploration seismologist in the Department of Geology and Geophysics at Yale University, and I've served as the SEG project manager for SEAM Phase 2 since its start in the spring of 2011. The theme of SEAM Phase 2, Land Seismic Challenges, is a natural follow-up to the enormously successful Phase 1 project that focused on modeling of deep-water marine seismic exploration in the Gulf of Mexico. This presentation runs for about 20 minutes and will introduce you to SEAM Phase 2 and to the 3 geologic models that member companies are constructing to represent distinct challenges for land seismic surveys in today's oil field environments. There are 22 members in the SEAM Phase 2 consortium, representing petroleum and geophysical service companies from around the world. Many of these companies, including BP, Shell, Saudi Aramco, Talisman, Tullow, CNPC, BGP, and Sinopec, are new members of SEAM for Phase 2. Before we look in detail at the SEAM Phase 2 models, it's worth first asking the question, why land seismic? The simple answer, of course, is that it's where the oil is. Estimates are that up to 2/3 of the world's remaining conventional oil and gas reserves are located or will be found on land. A large fraction of these conventional reserves are in giant known reservoirs of the Middle East, Russia, and Southwest Asia.
But there are significant land reserves remaining to be found in many areas of the globe, including vast regions of Africa and South America that are just now being explored with modern technology. Today, moreover, conventional oil and gas resources are just one part of the global hydrocarbon picture. Unconventional resources around the world are now being found and tapped by the technologies of 3D seismic, horizontal drilling, and hydraulic fracturing. These resources, shale gas, shale liquids, oil sands, and oil shale, are transforming world energy markets, partly because of this unconventional revolution, but also because of high prices and the need to replace production from older declining fields. Land seismic activity has been on the increase steadily around the world. This renewed interest in land seismic was part of the motivation for Phase 2. Another reason to focus on land is that land seismic is fundamentally different from marine seismic. Land sensors are now usually directional, not isotropic like marine water guns and hydrophones, with vibra-sized sources and three-component geophones becoming standards for land exploration. Land sensors also have to operate in difficult environments, in arid terrains with extreme near-surface heterogeneity, in foothills regions with rough topography. Finally, one of the most important challenges in land exploration today is the seismic characterization of fractured shale reservoirs to help set drilling and stimulation programs. Processing and interpretation of land seismic data has its own set of challenges. The seismic data profile on the right was provided by Schlumberger Western Geco from an exploration campaign in a desert region of the Middle East, famous for its shallow karsts. These geologic features are underground voids created when percolating groundwater dissolves limestone bedrock. In the insert photo on the left, you can see one of the karsts outcropping at the surface. It's large enough to swallow a field vehicle. Typical data from this region, shown on the right, looks nearly incoherent, but this is not caused by random noise. The data are repeatable from shot to shot, and the extreme disruption of the section is caused by scattering and reverberation of seismic energy in literally thousands and thousands of buried karsts. Here is another example where land seismic data are completely disrupted by scattering of surface wave energy. This example is provided by the oil company Total from an exploration campaign in the foothills of the Andes Mountains in Colombia, South America. The scattering here is not caused by buried voids, but by a combination of rough topography, as shown in the display on the left, and by extreme lateral variation of seismic velocity in the near surface. One of the goals of SEAM is to create digital Earth models that can reproduce these apparently chaotic effects in synthetic seismic data sets in a way that will allow data acquisition specialists working together with seismic data processors and interpreters to devise strategies for removing this geologic noise to create sharp images of reservoir structures at depth. Finally, there are large challenges even when land seismic data is clean and crisp, as in this example provided by BP. These data were simulated in a model with shale gas reservoirs patterned after the properties of the Woodford and Eagleford shales in Texas. The challenge here is to recognize the subtle patterns in the amplitudes and arrival times of reflections from horizons in the reservoirs, like the one highlighted on the right, that are caused by oriented fracture sets in the shale layers, or by changes in organic content, or by changes in the brittle or ductile character of the underlying rock matrix. Let's now look more closely at each of the three geologic models of SEAM Phase 2. The unconventional model of shale reservoirs was built largely by Carl Rigoni at BP under the supervision of Ray Barrett and the Geologic Modeling Technical Committee of SEAM Phase 2. The arid model of near-surface desert environments was built by Peter Wang at Schlumberger Western Geco under the supervision of Tim Keogh of Saudi Aramco and other members of the Near-Surface Modeling Technical Committee. The Foothills Model of rough topography overlying fold and thrust structures was built initially by Constantine Geria at Total and by structural geology experts at Midland Valley Exploration under the direction of Gladys Gonzalez of Repsol, chair of the SEAM Phase 2 Management Committee. The final stages in construction of the Foothills Model are now being carried out by Joe Stefani of Chevron. Keeping with the tradition of SEAM Phase 1, each of the three models in Phase 2 has a geologic type area. The near surface and overburden of the unconventional model was patterned after the Arkoma Basin and its shale reservoirs were based on the properties of the Eagleford Shale and the Woodford Shales in Texas. The near surface of the arid model is based on features found in the desert environments of the Saudi Arabia Peninsula. And both the near surface features and the fold and thrust structures of the Foothills Model were based on geology from the foothill region of the Llanos Basin in Colombia, South America. In the spring of this year, SEG and SEAM Corporation officially renamed the unconventional model as the Barrett Unconventional Model to commemorate the contributions of Ray Barrett. Ray was chief geophysicist of BP North America Gas, and as chair of the Geologic Modeling Committee of Phase 2, he was the driving force in the construction of this first SEAM Phase 2 model. Ray was diagnosed with cancer last year and tragically passed away because of complications related to its treatment. The Barrett model has a number of distinct structural elements highlighted in this 3D rendering provided by Peter Wang of Schlumberger. The reservoir zone consists of two distinct shale layers modeled after the Woodford and Eagleford shales in Texas. Sweet spots in the reservoirs, which are zones of high organic content and high fracture density coupled with brittle rock properties, are represented by a collection of 34 individual geobodies, several of which are exposed in the cutaway view at the bottom of the display. A thick chalk layer, modeled after the Austin chalk, lies between the two reservoir shales. The reservoir zone, which starts at a depth of 3 kilometers, is overlain by a thick interbedded sequence of shale, sand, and shaly sand layers, cut by 2 high-angle faults and penetrated by a braided stream channel. The entire section is topped by a 300-meter thick near-surface region based on shallow structures found in the Arkoma Basin of Texas, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Although the top of the Barrett model is flat, the near surface contains buried topography based on actual topography in the Arkoma Basin. Synthetic seismic simulations for the Barrett model are being performed by the Houston-based geophysical company AGT under contract to SEAM. AGT has developed a novel finite element code that can conform to structural features in the model. This 3D rendering provided by AGT shows the finite element mesh following contours of the buried topography. The production runs by AGT for the Barrett model represent the first large-scale numerical simulations of 3D exploration seismology done with a finite element code. This slide shows on the left some of the details in the stratigraphic sequence overlying the reservoir zone in the Barrett model, and on the right, the detailed shapes of the geobodies making up the bottom shale reservoir. The heart of the Barrett model is the reservoir zone. A key feature of the model is its representation of the full seismic anisotropy of fractured shale reservoirs. The macroscopic anisotropy of shale, which causes both compressional and shear seismic waves to travel at different speeds when moving in different directions through the rock, arises from two kinds of fine-scale features in the shale. The first are thin laminations, the thin bedding that is characteristic of all shale formations, and the second features are oriented fracture sets, usually vertical, that represent the combined effects of past deformations and current regional stress patterns. Determining the orientation of natural fractures by seismic remote sensing is often a key step in designing successful drilling programs for unconventional plays. Mathematically, the anisotropic properties of shale are encoded in the elasticity matrix of an orthorhombic anisotropic median. In the Barrett model, the elasticity matrix used for numerical simulations is built from the well-known Thompson parameters that are a convenient way of representing the weak anisotropy characteristic of most rocks. The model is discretized at the scale of blocks 6.5 meters on a side. This means that there are more than 1 billion independent building blocks in the Barrett model. A final ingredient in the Barrett model is the realistic representation of seismic attenuation in the near surface. Test runs by BP shown here indicate that intrinsic attenuation of shear stress must be included in the simulations to reproduce the balance between the amplitudes of body waves and surface waves that is seen in field data. The left panel shows a simulation in which no attenuation is included in the model. The slow-moving surface waves completely dominate the seismic data. More realistic is the simulation shown in the right panel, in which shear wave attenuation is included in the near-surface layers. This reduces the amplitudes of the surface waves and brings out the deep body wave reflection events. The simulations on this slide and the next one show that under good but realistic conditions, the effects of subtle features in shale reservoirs can be seen in land seismic data. The prominent events running across the middle of this split spread profile represent reflections from the interface between the shale and limestone beds in the upper part of the reservoir zone. This first slide shows a reference simulation in which the characteristic anisotropy associated with vertical fractures in the shale is omitted from the model. The second slide, which I will toggle to now, shows the simulation with the full anisotropy of highly laminated fractured shale present in the model. Toggling between the two slides clearly shows the effect of anisotropy in the shale beds with different features present at both long and short offsets. Modeling modern seismic surveys at full scale does not just mean detailed geologic models. It also means large-scale numerical computations. Production simulations on the Barrett model took nearly 6 months on a GPU-based supercomputing cluster at AGT. The simulations finished during the summer and are now being distributed to SEAM Phase 2 members. The full 3D surface seismic data set includes more than 36,000 shots over the Barrett model, with synthetic data being recorded at more than 1.6 million three-component receivers for each shot. Classic data sets for the Barrett model include smaller data volumes representing standard orthogonal 3D survey designs, high-resolution 2D lines, VSP, and well monitoring surveys, and a novel high-resolution reverse VSP with both vertical and shear fiber size sources. This final slide on the Barrett model shows a collection of offset VSPs where shear waves are prominent on the horizontal component recordings in a series of wells at different distances from the source. Let's now look briefly at the other two models under construction in Phase 2. The ARID model uses the same reservoirs and stratigraphy as the Barrett unconventional model, but replaces the first 500 meters with complex near-surface features encountered in desert terrains. Along with karsts, which appear in this cutaway display as floating bodies, the ARID model includes features such as wadis or stream channels, outcropping refractors, and unconsolidated sediments near the surface. The near surface of the ARID model is being built as a collaboration between Saudi Aramco and Western GECO using the Petrel geologic modeling platform. Numerical simulations on the ARID model are starting this fall and will be completed early next year. Numerical simulations of the seismic response of buried karst is a special challenge for the ARID model. The digital representation of the karst fields in the model is based on actual seismic images collected on the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, as shown in the image on the right, provided by Saudi Aramco, of a deep karst field. The irregular, small, and large dark circles are all karsts. The ultimate goal of the modeling is to simulate the real seismic response of karst accurately enough to reproduce effects seen in real data. The panel on the left shows a slice through the ARID model at the level of the shallow karst field. The irregular dark circles here are representations of water-filled karsts in the digital model. As shown in the data display on the right, seismic events generated by reverberations of seismic energy within the water-filled structures mimic the disruptive features seen in actual surveys in desert regions. The last model under construction in Phase 2 is the Foothills Model. This model represents the challenges of land seismic exploration in mountainous terrains. The type area for the Foothills model is the Llanos Basin and the foothills of the Andes Mountains in South America. The model itself is a collaboration between member companies Repsol and Total, working with the structural geology experts of Midland Valley Exploration under contract to SEAM Phase 2. The key structural features of the Foothills model are complex fold and thrust tectonics at depth. These features are overlain by the rough topography and rapid lateral velocity variations found in compressive tectonic zones, such as in the geologic regions overlying the Andes subduction zone. Test simulations done by Total show that strong surface wave scattering in foothills data do not arise from topography alone. The panel on the left shows a simulation for a model in which there are large differences in elevation along the section, but the velocity model more or less follows the topography. The raw seismic data shown at the bottom left are complex but interpretable. In contrast, the panel on the right shows what happens when large lateral fluctuations of shear wave velocity are introduced in a region extending about 100 meters below the topography. The interaction between surface wave scattering and the topography completely disrupts the seismic data after the arrival of the surface waves. The ARID and Foothills models are being built to understand how novel field acquisition patterns and new data processing methods can unravel this near-surface scattering and enable better seismic images to be made of subtle or complex structural features at depth. A final word about the technical work in SEAM. An important goal of SEAM Phase 2 is to push the state-of-the-art in numerical modeling of seismic data to its limit with the best algorithms currently available running on the world's largest and fastest computers. To recap, SEAM Phase 2 started in 2011 and has 22 participating oil and gas and geophysical service companies from around the world. 3 models have been constructed by the Phase 2 consortium: the Barrett unconventional model, the ARID model, and the Foothills Model. Production simulations on the Barrett model finished in July, and classic data sets are now being distributed to members. Production simulations on the ARID model will start in December of this year. Production simulations on the Foothills model will start early next year. SEAM Phase 2 expects to complete its work with classic data sets for all 3 models distributed to members by the end of 2015. All of the models and data will be available for purchase 2 years after the consortium closes. This concludes the presentation on SEAM Phase 2. On behalf of SEG and SEAM, I would like to acknowledge the contributions to this presentation made by the 22 member companies and their representatives on the Phase 2 management and technical committees. New SEAM projects are already underway and are covered in presentations following this one. You can ask Jan Madole, Manager of SEAM Corporation Affairs and Research Programs, or Corey Stallings, Research Programs Administrator for SEG, for further information about SEAM at the SEAM booth. Thank you for your attention.
Want to learn more? Visit us at www.seg.org/SEAM or email us at seam@seg.org.
SEAM is now. This is a fantastic time to join 2 new SEAM projects, pore pressure prediction and hazard avoidance through improved seismic imaging, and life of field during SEAM's 8th year of successful projects. These 2 new initiatives historically mark SEAM's new initiatives focused to impacting interpretation challenges head-on through collaboration that SEAM promotes.
I would like to tell you about SEAM's next collaborative industry project, pressure prediction and hazard avoidance through improved seismic imaging. The project will last for 3 years, commencing September 30th, 2014. The project budget will be over $2.8 million, and technical input will be provided by a minimum of 10 participating companies. The project will also receive significant Department of Energy co-funding. The project has 2 primary objectives. The first is to create a benchmark model and benchmark seismic data sets for industry and academic use in improving the technologies used for pre-drill prediction of pressure and drilling hazards. The second is to establish a preferred methodology for predicting pressure and for quantifying risk and uncertainty in the velocity estimation used for pressure prediction. Why now? It's clear this is a very high-value technical challenge. If successfully completed, we will have safer and lower-cost wells, better exploration prospect evaluation. Technologies are also rapidly evolving. Technologies for seismic acquisition, processing, and pressure prediction, as well as technologies for seismic modeling and simulation. Today, there is an industrial strength benchmark lacking, and this project will provide such a benchmark. Clearly, there will be benefit from industry collaboration. The U.S. Department of Energy agrees. SEAM has been awarded a $1.9 million research grant to cover the first 2 years of this 3-year project. Industry is expected to add an additional 20%. The project plan includes Earth model redevelopment, or in the first year, a geophysical simulation in the second year, processing trials in the third year, and at the end of the project, a final methodology report. SEAM, working with SEG, will also organize an industry workshop post-project. Model development will start with the existing SEAM Phase 1 subsalt earth model, representative of a typical section in the deepwater Gulf of Mexico. The model is very large, covering an area 35 kilometers by 40 kilometers and 15 kilometers deep. The model will be redesigned to be fit for purpose for pressure prediction studies. Narrow pressure zones will be added at top and base of salt. Inclusions and sutures will be incorporated in the salt. Lateral stress effects around the edges of salt will be added. Salt loading effects subsalt. We will have both sharp and gradual pressure transitions, and we will include lateral transfer and/or centroid effects. We may also include a smectidylite transition and other thermal effects. SEAM's proven approach of building a model by starting with rock properties will be used. We start with sand shale ratio, porosity, fluid type, and pressure. Local well control will provide appropriate transformations to elastic parameters. The resultant seismic simulation will therefore be ideal for testing pre-drill, inversion, and prediction, both technologies and methodologies. Let's take a look at the detail inside the model. On this cross-section, you will note a pseudo-well to the right of the salt body. These are the corresponding well logs, parameterized at 20 meters. On the left is the sand shale ratio, the starting point in black. Beside it is porosity in blue. Based on these and other rock properties, a density curve has been developed in green, and compressional wave P velocity is shown in red. Finally, on the right, you see the resultant P wave reflectivity. The existing model also includes parameterization for anisotropy and resistivity. I would like to bring your attention to the yellow star. This represents a middle Miocene reservoir inserted into the model. You can see on this plat the complexity of detail provided in the reservoir using geobody modeling techniques. The second deliverable will be a seismic simulation. It will be elastic and anisotropic, large scale, and will build on SEAM's extensive experience with the continuously improving state-of-the-art in modeling. We will record both streamer data, seafloor node data, and VSP data sets. The data sets will be oversampled, which will then allow us, through decimation, to test various acquisition designs. Because the data sets will be very large, we will extract classic data sets that can further facilitate ongoing academic and industry research. In the third year, the project will conduct processing trials as prioritized by the industry participating companies. We will evaluate selected vendor technologies. We will test novel acquisition geometries. And we will evaluate new approaches. For example, the ratio of P wave velocity to shear wave velocity. You note in this log data that shear velocity is more sensitive to pressure changes than is compressional wave velocity. However, it is rarely used in practice, A new SEAM benchmark will be ideal for testing what is possible and can this additional information be brought to bear on pre-drill pressure prediction. A key deliverable will be a proposed methodology, a methodology that can be used for improved pre-drill pressure prediction, emphasizing not just the prediction of pressure, but also the related risk and uncertainty. This methodology will be calibrated with the processing trials, and the industry consortium will generate recommendations for ongoing research. One final deliverable is a research workshop to be hosted by SEAM using SEG's standard research workshop practices. It will happen post-project, and it will bring together industry and academia to demonstrate the results they are having and to create additional recommendations for ongoing research. The project will be conducted using SEAM's proven collaborative approach, featuring strong project management, technical decision-making by industry experts, a rigorous qualification of all simulation vendors, and the most important principle, those companies, those industry participants that are paying for the project will determine the direction of the project. Stated another way by a satisfied SEAM Phase 1 participant, one of the major benefits of the SEAM project is the diverse expertise supplied by each company. Thank you.
We definitely see the benefits to SEAM. We have found tremendous value in testing survey design methods and in testing forward modeling and depth imaging algorithms. By Peter Wang, Western GECO. Want to learn more? Visit us at www.seg.org/SEAM or email us at seam@seg.org.
Hi, my name is Bill Abreu, and I'm a board member of the SEG Advanced Modeling Corporation, which is a research cooperative. The research cooperative is different from consortium in that people come and they share their ideas and they get very much involved in the project and cooperate, which is a huge benefit for us, and we've had good success in phases 1, 2, and pore pressure. And now what we're announcing is another project for the year 2015 called Life of Field, which is a little different than some of the others that we've done before because it's aimed at as an interpretation challenge. And when I say that, I think that if we go through slide 2, I think what you'll find is that it's not only about seismic imaging. The slide that we are showing here in slide 2 is one that is helpful to understand from these two amplitude maps from 1986 up on the top. There's an original oil water contact, and it's been produced already. And so you can see from the yellow that the oil has shrunk. And there are logs at well location D that show the water is coming up as time goes on. By 1998, it has shrunk enough that people were thinking they would abandon the field. But the seismic data shot at that time showed that we had some leftover opportunities, and we did drill 2 wells, and it was very successful. So the question that we need to ask as an industry is, if you've got well data observations and if you have geophysical observations, what can you do to understand what's going on in the reservoir and manage it? And that's the reason that we want to move forward with the Life of Field Interpretation Project. The SEAM Advanced Modeling Corporation is looking at Life of Field because we think a synthetic model is going to be really helpful. A Life of Field includes expertise integrating geology, engineering, and geophysics. But this full work process is actually complicated, lengthy, it's inefficient, and it's not really benchmarked for accuracy. So we think benchmark data is going to be really, really good to have. The Life of Field project is designed to generate complex geology, complete reservoir description, geophysics, seismic data, magnetic data, electric data, gravity data. Then do reservoir dynamics so that we simulate the fluid flow and the resulting effects, geomechanical effects as well as effects that we would see from seismic data and the resulting wells. This generates a unique data set because it's the field test. You really can't find a place in the world where you know where everything is going on, and you always have incomplete data sets. So this is the one opportunity we're going to have as an industry to have all of the information at our fingertips that we need to actually figure out what's going on in the reservoir if we run this backwards. That is, if we take the well data and we take the geophysical data and ask the question, what happened in the reservoir, we can test our techniques out. We're initiating this project in January 2015, and we're scaled to complete our deliverables in about a 3-year period. And so in that sense, it's similar to some of the other projects like SEAM 1 and 2. So the life of field purpose is to improve the industry workflow. For what? Life of field reservoir management, the interpretation. There's the static model. From the well data and the geophysical data, you can build the reservoir model and take a look and see how well that's going compared to your personal interests and other people. Secondly, populating that reservoir model with static and dynamic properties and simulate the seismic, gravity, magnetic, and EM from the reservoir model and check against the observed 3D data. The dynamic models then, it's a forward simulation process, as we know, and we can check that against the well response, and you can also check your simulated seismic data again against 4D observations. So what else can you do for other dynamic workflows? The answer is geomechanics, predicting the reservoir, the overburden, and the underburden effects. And there's a good thought here, I think, that you could also take this whole work process and ask the question, is it fit for CO2 monitoring, injection, simulation, and sequestration? So these are a lot of important workflows that we have in the industry, and they're actually not all that well pulled together. It's difficult to do. The software doesn't really talk very well to each other. Professions don't talk well to each other, and it takes a long time. But it's very, very important to do, so we think that this interpretation practice for workflows is going to be helped out by this data. This is a simple concept about how we might actually go about this. The first cube that you see down here is a blue one that says static reservoir model, and it would contain complex geology. There's a little diagram in the upper left, right, that shows a sort of a green two-dimensional box with fluvial over deltaic over deep water sandstones and some carbonate banks on the sides. And they may not be vertically stacked up, but we can put all kinds of reservoirs in the reservoir model. And that's T0. That's the static reservoir model. Generate that, the well data that goes with it, the seismic data that goes with it, and there we've got, that first look. T1, we are going to have changes in fluids and pressures. So there are different production mechanisms. Same thing. What we do is we go forward, and after T1 and the fluid and the pressures are there, we can take a look at the well data, the geophysical data, and simulate that. Then T2, again, changes in fluid pressures, but maybe this time we also do CO2 injection for enhanced recovery. T3, more changes in pressure and fluid and CO2 injection, and also geomechanics. So the point is that it's a time-lapse process. We have to sort out how many of these we're going to actually do in terms of time steps, how many reservoirs to put in, but that's open for the participants to appreciate. So the concept then is from the reservoir simulator, we'll be talking through the rock physics model to geophysical simulations and also connecting to geomechanics. Those are not coupled. They're not well coupled at present, and we think that that's probably still the way to go. But all of the physics is going to be consistent, and that's actually a fairly important point because it's a difficult problem. And the more we work at this as a group, the better off we're going to be, both in terms of understanding how we're communicating parameters and grid sizes and scales, but also the impact when we change this. And that can all be part of the sub-research that we can do as part of this project. Well, as usual in SEAM projects, all of the rock parameters are going to be petrophysically based. So on the left diagram, you see rock properties, shale, porosity, fluid, saturation, etc. And the point is that you do a forward modeling from the rock properties to handle elastic parameters, VP, VS, density, Q, and then again forward to get geophysical responses, VP, VS, electromagnetic, gravity, etc. So when you are in a position where someone hands you the seismic data, the problem that we're trying to face is to go backwards to the elastic and back to the rock properties. And that's what this is intended to do. We'll have seismic data, we'll have well data, and the idea is to work that and see if we can get our work processes for reservoir management improved. The well data, we'll be simulating well data, and there isn't anything that you can't do. If you can think of it, we can figure out a way to simulate it. So we'll have all the logs that we think are appropriate, and here's a short list: resistivity, density, sonic gamma ray, SP, spectral gamma ray, also a lithology log for cuttings, core, PVT, and of course downhole pressure gauges and the surface fluids. So that'll all be part of each of the wells that are simulated. We also will be looking at geophysical simulations, which SEAM has actually gotten fairly good at. The surface seismic acquisition probably would be land or shallow water, although that's open. Viscoelastic, anisotropic, full azimuth geometries. We'll also collect surface gravity, magnetic, electromagnetic, and borehole. So we've been doing this on the other projects. We think we know how to do that, and we're set up well to do that. The data would be pre-stack, and so therefore there's a data process that goes with that. So we'll be delivering the process seismic data. It's important to note that we're not going to pick on easy reservoirs or impossible reservoirs, but we will try to work with different types of reservoirs. We think either in the same model or break them up separately. And all of the reservoirs that we think are reasonable will be considered, including carbonates. And I think that's an important element because that's a fairly complicated and quite different way of doing business. And as the community of researchers get together, what we're going to find is that we have differing thoughts and different opinions and different ways of approaching it. So that's going to be really valuable. And again, we'll be generating data sets that are useful benchmarks. So we'll look at several production mechanisms. And just as a small example here, on the upper diagram, if you had different fault blocks, you could have different production mechanisms. Up at the top, you'd have gas production. Next block down, perhaps you'd have gas on oil with a horizontal producer. And then maybe a depletion producer in the next fault block, and then a water injector with water drive. The concept would be to be sure that we have got reasonable and appropriate geological thoughts about what's in the reservoir, dealing with being able to handle the simulation of it geologically, and also at the engineering scale, and seismically. So the point is, pretty much any production process that you can think of, we can also work. And so this doesn't have to be any particular field that we know about in the world, but we'll draw on those analogs and put together what we think is challenging, interesting, and hopefully compact data set that can be used by researchers everywhere. The geomechanical effects from production will also be calculated, and this is interesting in the sense that there are changes both within the reservoir and there are also changes outside of the reservoir. Those data sets will also be there, and we think that that's an important element in everything that we do now in field management, and that's going to be one of the critical deliverables that really helps the total integration of the project. So in summary, the concept here is to do forward synthetic work. Pretty much anything that you can think of in geology and reservoir that you want to put in, we build and simulate. You don't have to go out and wait for some benchmark data set that is difficult to find, hard to get because of the issues about intellectual property, liability. This is data that should be able to get passed around all around the world by everyone. The participants will have this data for a 2-year period before it's allowed to be publicly offered, and that's an advantage. The reservoir simulations, as you can see from the top, will go forward, and then we'll have both the well data from that, and also, as you can see, the geophysical simulations as well, including seismic, G&M. And we think that's a very, very viable data set. Is a schedule for the seam life of field that shows that this is going to take about, perhaps we think, a 2, possibly 3-year period. There's the base case model design in that first year, which we think is now going to be the year 2015. And that takes some time, as you might imagine, trying to sort out the reservoirs and what we're going to put in. Then there's that base case simulation, and then the seismic processing to go with it, and then different time steps. In the 4th year, we will in fact have a completion of the report and the data archive to handle. So we think that we're going to be delivering interesting information and data to people right in the end of the 1st year. We think that that's, or possibly the middle of the 2nd year, we think that that's appropriate and timely, and really look forward to the potential for your working with us at SEAM in life of field, which is an interpretation challenge. If you have any questions about this, you can find SEAM representatives to help you out. Thank you very much for your time. This is Bill Abriel, and look forward to working with you in life of field SEAM.
Our interest is for R&D to create improved imaging. We also see many research papers coming out of these efforts for years to come, resulting in algorithm development. This benefits the entire industry. Kevin Bishop, KB Size, SEAM Corp board member. Register for SEAM Workshop through SEG Annual Meeting Registration. For more information, email stefan.coccolini@cgg.com. Organizers include Stefan Coccolini, George L. Cassie, and Milos Vetkovich, through the support of SEG Advanced Modeling Corporation. SEAM is propelling the science of geophysics to meet the grand challenges of tomorrow.